Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is MC Brown. I'm VP of Products here at Continuent. And in today's webinar, we're going to be having a look at another one of our software as a service customers. Today, we're going to be looking at a company called Bluefin. And Bluefin provide financial payment services. Before we get into the presentation and we see what it is we have to say and how Bluefin are using our software and using our technology, a few pieces of admin for how this webinar will work. This webinar is being recorded. If at any time you want to come and view the recording of this webinar or indeed any of our past webinars, you can always go to our website or go to our YouTube channel and access it there. You're also free to ask questions. If you have any questions during the session, there is actually a section within the GoToWebinar panel. You can ask a question. If there's time at the end, I will take the questions. If we don't have any time at the end, depending on obviously how long it takes the webinar to go through, then we'll collect up the questions and we'll put them into a blog post and we'll make those available after the presentation has been completed. So with those two tiny little pieces of admin out of the way, let's get started and start having a look at how Bluefin use Continuent technology. Now, you know, we've been doing this series. This is the third in a series of presentations, webinars that we've been doing on this topic about how our customers are actually using our software. And what we've been trying to do is demonstrate how Continuent is often at the heart of how people are delivering their software as a service onto their customers in turn. And something that we've just generally noticed, obviously over the last few years, and we're not unique in this, is a general change in the market rate, is that as people move to software as a service and as companies move to providing software as a service and indeed services just in general, it has meant that there has to be a significant change and a significant alteration in the way that people are delivering them and the way that people are supporting their back-end services. It's no longer possible for us to ignore the way that these things are supported and the way that this information is made available. You know, we are living, as it says here, in a subscription economy. We're in this situation now where you don't buy a piece of software and expect to use it for an unlimited period of time because you bought the software once and that's the only time you're going to use it. Instead, we're in a position where you're going to use it according to how long you need it. That means that could be hours, that could be days, that could be months. But it also means that that's what you're ultimately what your customers also expect, right? I mean, we're used to nowadays a whole variety of different services, from AWS for those of us in the technology world to people like Uber and others, where we are basically taking those short little periods of time and making that available. But it does change the method with which these services are delivered. And you could look at this in sort of very, very generic terms, and you could look at it as in very specific terms. You know, no longer do we expect, for example, to be able to go down to the shops, and we know that the shops will open at 9 o'clock in the morning, and, you know, providing we get there between 9 o'clock and 6, we'll be able to use it. In the same way as, you know, we might have phoned our bank and done it at specific times. Now we expect to be able to phone our bank in the middle of the night if that happens to be when we're up. And so the same then becomes true for those of us that are providing these services to our customers through various computing platforms. Customers need to be able to access these services all the time. So that means they need to be available 24 hours. They need to be available all the time, and they need to be available and resilient. And that means they've got to be able to access it and use it anywhere, anytime. And it's got to be always available. And that does shift the way in which we make those services available as people who are making the software and this technology available to different customers. So we came up with this webinar series. This is what we're talking about today. We are trying to look at how we are making the back-end services of our software as a service customers, such as Bluefin, who we're talking about today, available to them so that they can go on and provide those services in this anytime 24-hour style service of delivery, and also make sure that it's always available. And then, that obviously then covers a number of additional aspects. We're obviously looking at things like revenue protection. How do we ensure that the service is always available? There's no point in having a 24-hour service if when the customer comes along to it, the service is not up and running because there's been some kind of failure in the system. You want it to always be available and always be supported. And we also want to make sure that hopefully our customers' services are successful. And if the customer services are successful, then we want them also to be successful, right? And we want them to go on and be able to expand that service. And so again, we want to be in a position where we can make our technology accessible to our customers, so that they can make it accessible to their customers in a method that allows them to extend and expand as their business grows through that process. So we've had a look at a couple of these companies already. We started off by actually having a look at Samsung Arctic, which is their Internet of Things platform, which supports their own Samsung hardware. We also had a look at the last webinar presentation we did was with Adobe Sign, which provides digital signing of documents and contracts through using the Adobe PDF platform, among other technologies. Today we're looking at Bluefin Payment Systems. So Bluefin provide a number of different payment services, but the two primary ones that they support are their PayConex, which is a payment gateway for taking payments, via credit card, and also their Decryptx service, so decryption-as-a-service operation, which supports the ability to encrypt, decrypt information as it goes through. And they provide this around the world, and they provide this on, in a number of different locations, and they provide this, again, as a service to other customers. Future webinar that we'll be sorting out, we will be doing one on New Voice Media. New Voice Media, again, have a slightly different use case, but we'll have a look at that in a future webinar session. So what we're going to have a look at today is Bluefin. Bluefin have a service that probably most of us are very, very familiar with, from the perspective that we all pay for services nowadays with credit cards, etc. And so we're familiar with the need to be able to process payments and take those payments from a variety of different sources and from a variety of different locations and methods, and Bluefin provide that, and they provide that as a service onto their customers. You can come in, you can register and say, I need to be able to take payments, I need to be able to take that information, I need to be able to process that, and I need to process that information. Now, you can imagine that taking that information is obviously very, very critical. There are a whole wide variety of issues with taking payments. You need to ensure that you have taken it. You need to ensure that the data has and the transactions have been committed. And we are literally talking here about financial transactions rather than database transactions. But obviously, those financial transactions are backed by those database transactions, right? So we need to make sure that they occur. We need to make sure that they're logged and recorded. We need to make sure that they go through. And we need to make sure that this is available all the time. You can't have a situation where people are using Bluefin to take their payments. The customer comes in and it says, oh, sorry, the service is down and we don't know how long it's going to be available, because not only does that affect, Bluefin's service, it affects all of their customers. All of their customers will be unable to take payments, and that affects, hundreds, thousands of businesses unable then to take their own money, their own payment, their own information to be able to process their own data. Now, they also have this decryption as a service operation, which again, this is designed to allow decryption of financial information, decryption of information. So you can put the information in, pull it out when you need it, while having it stored within a secure location. Now, all of these things are fairly typical from the perspective of this is a service that we can all understand, and a service that we can all resonate with on some level. But how do we actually make sure that Bluefin are able to do what they need to do? So we took this approach within this webinar series, and we wanted to focus on basically 5 different areas of how our software helps Bluefin and the other companies involved. And then we're going to look and drill down into how each of these things actually affected specifically for Bluefin and how that operates. So the first one is revenue protection. That is, how do we ensure that Bluefin are able to continue operating and Bluefin are able to to continue to take the money, so that they don't have any downtime and they don't have a situation where they are unable to take the money, unable to process the financial payments that they need in order to support their customers. Then there's the revenue upside, and the revenue upside is about making sure that Bluefin can expand as necessary as their software as a service, their operation increases and provides more services, so that they can increase the number of customers that they have supported in their service, so they can increase the number of the number of transactions that they make. So that's both extending their own service, as well as obviously ensuring that the database that is handling that process and the systems that are handling that database, that is obviously the Continuent Clustering, Tungsten clustering software, is able to handle that in such a way that the customers are unaware of the fact that it's expanding, and Bluefin are able to do it without a huge amount of additional work. The third one is a lower cost, right? We want to make sure that Bluefin are doing this without having to expend too much money, without having to expend too much energy trying to get the solution to work, and also a complete solution, right? We don't want our customers to be in a situation where they put our software solution in and then they find out that they've got another, they've got another 2, 3, 4 pieces of software that they require in order to get the overall solution to work. And lastly, we have good customer service. We talk a lot about how great our customer service is, and we're very proud of it. But again, this becomes a critical part of how we provide our service onto our customers to help them support ultimately their customers. So, what do Bluefin do? I've talked a little bit about the services that Bluefin provide, but how do they actually do that from the perspective of using the Continuent solution? And again, I'm going to be drilling down into this in a few later slides, so that you'll be able to understand this, and you'll be able to understand how this works. The underlying aspects of this, Bluefin uses Continuent. Bluefin uses our Tungsten clustering solution, or Continuent Tungsten as was. And they use that clustering solution. They use it in a number of different data centers, and they use it in co-located data centers. So they're not using cloud services. So they're not deployed in AWS or Azure or Google or Rackspace or any of the others. They are actually using their own data centers, and it's a completely private co-located deployment. But they make use of our multimaster clusters. So that is the ability to distribute the data within individual clusters that are then connected together and distribute the data between the two. They are using that technology partially because they want some resilience in the solution, and partially because they are geo-distributed, and that provides them with a combination of data security from the perspective of where the data is located, and also some performance advantages. So how does that look? So let's look at revenue protection as a first solution. So Tungsten clustering provides continuous operation, right? The Tungsten clustering solution, MySQL-based database clustering solution, it provides continuous operation. So we can keep your systems running without your application actually being aware of the fact that something might have happened. You have multiple databases. We distribute the load across those databases, and we distribute the operation of the information across those databases. So, in the event of a failure within a single host, within a single cluster, within that environment, we provide a site level failover, automated failover. So if a node goes down, whether that's a master or a slave within the cluster, if a node goes down, we automatically identify that, remove the slave, reconfigure the cluster, again, without your applications being aware of the fact that this has occurred, you continue operating without the system going down at any time. So your database remains available, your application remains running, everything continues to operate as if there's has never been an issue. Now, we also provide cross-site failover. So in a multi-master deployment, such as Bluefin are using, right, we have 2 clusters at 2 different sites. If the one site goes down, we can redirect all of your queries over to the remote site. so we can automatically fail over. And because there's replication between those two sites, the data is being moved across. So the two sites are in sync with each other. And that also means that in the event of a local failure at site 1, we can redirect queries from applications at site 1 through to site 2 if it's still available. Or indeed, if you wanted to change that at an application level, and now all of your services go through directly through site 2 because site 1 has completely gone down and there is no connectivity there, site 2 can continue operating. It's still got a copy of all of the data. It's still got a copy of all of the information. Your applications, again, can remain running and your customers will be unaware. And that means that you have full support there, right? Anything happens locally, you're covered automatically by the clustering software. Anything happens at a site level, again, we can redirect that content over to a different site. Again, you're covered. Right, so you always have, full transfer of service in the event of a failure, local or entire site-based, also, full resiliency in terms of failures between data centers, whether that's a network failure, hardware failure, some level of failure between those systems. And it also means you have multiple levels of resiliency, right? So that means that you could have one node or even two nodes, 3 nodes, etc., go down in a single cluster. We will continue to run the system, and then also, make a decision about, switching over to an entire different site should something go wrong. Backing up all of the automated systems and all of the systems that make that work from a software level is obviously our support, which again, we're very, very proud of. You get 24/7 support. We continue it in order to continue and get things working. We don't quote availability times as a rule from our software because it relies on so many different parameters in terms of how it operates and what is available in terms of the customer's deployment and the customer's environment and where they're being deployed. But we put here 5.9 availability. We have customers in some cases who have been running for years with no downtime using our software. So we're fully aware of the level of support and the level of backup and resiliency that we provide using our software. Now, how about the revenue upside? So the revenue upside, as I said earlier, revenue upside is about ensuring that customers are available not only to continue, servicing requests, because revenue upside, you want to guarantee that you're going to be able to service requests for your customers, but also how we can guarantee uptime and availability, and also make it expandable and performant from the perspective of trying to make sure that the customer is able to do what they do within the time limit of what is required. You don't want a situation where, as you add more customers, the performance of the overall system starts to reduce, and you have no way of addressing that or identifying that or correcting that particular situation without that occurring. So another reason why Bluefin use Continuent is because they can guarantee that their services are going to be available all the time. And this means that they can further guarantee onto their customers that their service is going to be available all the time, right? Super high availability, that 5 nines I quoted on the last time. It means that they can turn around to their customers and say, we can guarantee that our service is always going to be available. They could also turn around and say to their customers, you're never gonna see a situation where you get to see a failover and you get to see some kind of issue with the system. Their customers are never going to see a failover. Their customers will be unaware if there's a failover in the system, because the Tungsten clustering solution will handle that for them. We can also help to guarantee that uptime. We can guarantee that availability, and we can guarantee that their customers are going to be serviced and that the database is going to remain available and the application is going to remain available off of the back of that. And we can, as I said, reroute traffic automatically. We can make sure that our geo-distributed clusters, they can make the best use of the performance in their different locations. and overall provide a better customer experience. For many of our customers, particularly in the software as a service space, they are looking for the maximum availability and the maximum uptime, and the maximum overall performance for their solution, and this is what they get with Tungsten Clustering. And I put a little quote in here, so this is actually a quote directly from the people at Bluefin. Without Continuent, we couldn't do what we do. Without the technology, without the software, and the functionality provided by the Tungsten Clustering software, Bluefin actually couldn't operate and do what they do. And they're only able to do that because of the way that we can provide and make this software and these services available to them. Now, the lower cost. Lower cost is always an interesting one, from the perspective, you want to be able to provide the best possible service onto your customers without having to expend, a massive amount of money. And there are a number of different ways in which we make this happen with the Tungsten Clustering software. One of the primary ones is that we are completely deployment agnostic. And this means that, you can make the best use of whatever service you have, and whatever service you want to provide and whatever environment you want to be able to provide that on. So, if you're in a situation where, maybe you already have an existing AWS deployment and you have existing services and you want to be able to make use of that, you can go ahead and deploy us within AWS. If you have your own data centers, you can deploy us within your own data centers. If you have your own data center in the US, but you found that in Asia, it's cheaper for you to use Azure. You can deploy in, a local data center in the US and on Azure in Asia, and you can still connect the clusters together. You can still have the geo distribution. You can still have that connection between the two sites. We don't care, and so that means you can take the best advantage of the technology, the services, the hardware, in the environment that you already have available. Right, and this is really, really important and really, really critical, about how we make our software available. And it means that for people like Bluefin, right, they're able to make a solution and make the best choice about that solution that maximizes their environment and maximizes their existing infrastructure and their existing costs in order to make use of that. As I mentioned earlier, Bluefin use co-located data centers. Obviously, with Bluefin's environment, their primary concern here is security, and so they use their own data centers to manage their own security and their own environment. And that means that they deploy directly within their own data centers and then have those co-located data centers that we then replicate the data between. Now, I should also say, while I've raised the topic of security, we have, we are able to secure the data, and we're able to secure the transmission of data between the data centers, as well as you wanting to use, whatever VPN, etc. you would want to use between systems. We can also encrypt it using SSL, etc. for that communication and that distribution of data as well. The bottom line, though, for Bluefin came down to, a simple thing of, a commercial solution for this technology, for their environment and their service that they wanted to offer onto their customers was much, much easier to maintain than trying to look at a typical open source solution where they may have had to stitch together a number of different parts. And that then goes to the idea of a complete solution. Now, the Continuent Tungsten software, the Tungsten Clustering software as it now is, has been around for a long time. It's been over 10 years of development. That means that it's a very mature product. It also means that it's a very, very complete product, and we've tried to make it as seamless and invisible for customers and their applications as possible. That means that there is a huge amount of intelligence built into the product. So a lot of the decisions about, has this gone down? How do we recover it? How do we hide a node because it's now failed? How do we bring back a node after a failure? How do we bring these things together? We are actually able to make all of those decisions automatically because of the intelligence built into the product. We also know that, the clustering solution is specially designed so that it is to an application, we just look like another data. We just look like the database. You just look like you're connecting to a MySQL database, and the Tungsten connector means that the abstraction, the fact that there is a connector that hides the fact that there is a cluster that may contain 2, 3, 5, 10 different nodes behind it. The application is unaware of that. The application just connects to the connector, and the connector redirects the queries, the reads, the writes to the right nodes within the overall cluster. And all of this happens automatically, and all of this is part of the standard software. It is a complete solution. You don't need to buy anything else. You don't need to install a separate proxy. You don't need to configure any additional software. You don't need to stitch other components together in order to get it to work. If you put Tungsten Clustering in, you can actually put Tungsten Clustering in without making any changes to your application whatsoever. Your application will just think it's talking to a standalone single MySQL database instance. It also means that there's no customer integration required. You don't need to change your application. You don't need to do any customization. You don't need to do anything to stitch it in order to make it work within your existing environment. We just look like that standard MySQL database. It also means that there's no manual management. On a day-to-day basis, the cluster will more or less run itself. And again, we have some customers who have clusters that have been running for, months and months and months without them ever logging in, because as far as they're concerned, as long as it's working, there's no need for them to go in and have a look at it. You don't need to go in and check. You don't need to go in and say, oh, hang on a second, is everything working okay? Everything will be working okay if, your application is running and anything goes wrong. If anything goes wrong, it's generally handled automatically by the clustering environment. We do the failover, we do the switch, we do the whole process. And again, to reiterate a point, we're platform agnostic. You want to deploy on a Linux deployment in AWS, or you want to do it in your data center, or you want to do it in virtual machines, a VMware environment, whatever. We support all of those different options. And we always operate in exactly the same way, always work in that database and that agnostic fashion. Now, last thing I'm going to mention here, customer service. We are really, 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 really proud of our support environment. We have a team of engineers who are able to help you with your service, and they're not only engineers that are experts on our software, they are engineers who are experts just generally on databases and database environments, and particularly MySQL. A lot of them have been site engineers. Some of them have been site engineers for our software at different customers, and some of them have obviously deployed the type of technology that we're talking here. Many of them have been here for a long time. I think it's safe to say we actually have engineers who've been here for as long as Continuent has been around, which is now 15 years. And a lot of our engineers have certainly more than 15 years of their own experience outside of Continuent in order to help. And this covers both support engineers and obviously the developers and the engineers that are working on the solution. We have great customer support. If there's one thing that all of our customers say, they love the customer support. In general, if you sign up to our customer support service and you raise a ticket, you will get a response within less than 5 minutes. And that's even for non-urgent tickets. For non-urgent tickets, you're guaranteed a response within less than an hour. But actually, for most tickets, you're going to get a response within 5 minutes. And yeah, to reiterate again, we have customers who are running Continuent software, clustering and our replication software, and they are measuring their uptime in months and years without an issue. I think that's a testament not only to the quality of the software and the engineering that went into it, but obviously the support that goes along with that. So a brief little bit now about the technical detail of actually how Bluefin have operated. So I mentioned this before. Bluefin are using our Tungsten clustering, and they're using our Tungsten clustering in a multimaster style deployment. So this means they have 2 clusters. The 2 clusters are in 2 different data centers, and we replicate the data between those 2 different data centers. The 2 different data centers are there to provide data resilience, but also to provide performance resilience from the perspective of both of those. This is why we call it multi-master. You can read and write into either of those clusters, and the data will not only be updated within those clusters, but will be replicated between the two. So if you update a record in site 1, it gets updated and recorded in site 2. And this provides not only the resilience and the performance, but it also means that, obviously if site 1 goes down, site 2 has got a copy of what happened in site 1 and vice versa, right? So you're completely covered within this environment. In terms of what Bluefin have done, Bluefin do this. They have separate clusters and indeed separate multimaster clusters for their payment gateway and decryption-as-a-service operation. And then they actually also have separate clusters that handle their production, certification, and UAT environments. So they are using multiple clusters and multiple deployments, and they have exactly the same thing in each situation, so that they can monitor it and test their applications against each of these solutions in order to get it to work. Each data center is individual, each data center is standalone. So again, like I said, they're not using a cloud service, they're not using anything else. They are handling, however, a relatively large number of records. They're not, in terms of transaction counts and transaction times, they're not one of our biggest customers, but 350 million records every single month go through these servers. I would say that's a fairly high level of activity, especially when it's coupled against, the resilience, the HA, the DR functionality that we provide. So, bottom line, what does that mean in terms of Bluefin and why they use us? Bluefin have used us. We have, to quote again what they said, they wouldn't be able to do what they do without the Continuent software in place, right? We have managed to provide them with a service that enables them to ensure their revenue protection, ensure the maximum of resilience between their data centers and between their data for critical information. Financial information is really important. That the connector and the ability of the overall clustering solution to abstract the layer so that their application is unaware of the fact that they're talking to a cluster. Their application just thinks they're talking to a single MySQL server without being aware of all of the HA and the DR that it provides. And also, the automated management, the automated system, and the customer service all means that, Bluefin largely don't spend a lot of time managing solution, because the solution itself is self-managing. But if there is a problem, we can get them up and running and get them started quickly and easily. Overall, it's also easy to manage and deploy. They don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. They don't spend a lot of time doing it. And so bottom line is, we help them lower their costs and lower their requirements in terms of needing someone to manage the overall system. So that's it. I mean, hopefully this has been useful to you to understand how we support Bluefin software as a service operation. As I said, this is part of a series. There are 4. We're looking at 4 different customers. We've already looked at Adobe and Samsung. We will be looking at New Voice Media in a future one. And again, we're looking at the key aspects that are important for all of these software as a service operations, right? Revenue protection, revenue upside, lower cost, providing a complete solution, and providing a working solution that handles everything, and supporting that stellar support that backs up the entire system in order to make it work. Hopefully you liked what you've seen. If you'd like to know more about what Continuent do and what Continuent provide, please feel free to go and have a look at our website. If you want to get in touch with us, maybe you want to do a POC, maybe you want to see the software in action, please come along, have a look at the website, maybe get in touch with us. We can certainly sort something out. There are plenty of webinars that will demonstrate to you how the software works and how the software operates and what the software does. Again, we're more than happy for you to go and have a look at that, go and have a look at our past webinars, our training sessions, etc., or come along and ask us a question. And, if you want to know who's involved, again, go and have a look at the website. These are some of the people that are involved, some of the people that you would end up talking to when you come along. Just to reiterate, my name is MC Brown. I'm VP of Products here at Continuent. Hopefully you found the webinar useful. Hopefully you'll attend our future webinars and you'll come back and see, what we've been able to do for New Voice Media and how we've been able to make their life easier for supporting their software as a service operation. So I'm afraid I'm slightly over time. So I'm not going to be able to take any questions, but if any questions have come up during the course, I will answer those and we'll put those into a blog post immediately after this session. But thank you very much for attending, and I hope to speak to you all soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.